this heating pad is starting to kick into, so that helps.
And we are live here to talk about how much I love weddings. Just kidding. We're here to talk about the crown, political propaganda, and all of the fabulous TV that we've watched over these past couple weeks. So, over the holidays. Now, we've been pretty limited because that thing that we've been talking about, that moment we've been dreading, where the writer's strike and the actor's strike actually finally hits us, like the repercussions really hit, that's now. Like now is the true desert. We've been through a mild desert. This is the deepest desert. This is the like, oh, it's really nothing except reruns and Married at First Sight for the next like 4 weeks or whatever. So, welcome to the desert with me. In the midst of that is an oasis. No, wait, a mirage that is the crown, because that got one last couple gut punches in the final season as well. It was like, hey guys, you know how we were like royal propaganda from the start and you put up with it because you like Elizabeth? What if we stay royal propaganda when it gets to Charles? So that's just like a little sneak preview of us talking about that. But before I get into all that, before we dive in, Carrie and Kate, how are you? How were your holidays? And do you bring me any news?
Kate, you can go first.
Uh, okay. I'm good. Holidays were eventful. We all made it out alive. We're seeing the
Okay.
other side. I
Love
do
that.
have some news. So, there is not actually, this is actually the time of year that we would be getting the Legends of Vox Machina show.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it was because it was impacted by the writer's strike and the actor's strike. I could see the writers' strike because they would still be writers, but I think the animated actors are different guilds, so I'm not entirely sure. But we are starting to hear little whispers and rumbles that they're going to announce when that will be dropping. So we have an announcement that there will be an announcement. Um, and they have been making progress on the other show in that same universe, but again, we don't really know when that will be coming out. So the Mighty Nine show, not really sure yet. And then Miss Scarlet and the Duke will start back on January 7th.
I'm so excited. Okay, just remember how
Mhm.
absolutely insane, how feral Kate and I were last time we had Miss Scarlet and the Duke. Now, just imagine how insane we're going to be when we have literally not one other thing to watch or think or talk about. I will be so insufferable. In conclusion, show up in 2 weeks for that. Harry, what about you?
I had a good Christmas, New Year, old me, old body, but I'm making do. Uh, the only news I have is the premiere for Marvel's Echo. If you remember, that's the character who was like essentially Kingpin's adopted daughter made an appearance over a couple episodes in the Hawkeye series. Her series starts, I think it's January 9th, which is a day sooner than they were anticipating. If you've seen the trailer, it's quite bloody and brutal. I think it's the first Disney Plus series that gets an R rating, and they take full advantage of it with the sort of violence that we are expecting to see. Think old school Daredevil and those series with a little bit more flair. So I'm excited and happy to take a look at that. So January 9th, if I'm not mistaken. Look out.
That will be fun. I will add that to like kind of the list of Marvel things I need to catch up on. That list includes What If and Loki, and I believe we'll be talking a bit about What If today. So I'm excited to hear about that. It's a little preview before I jump in as we enter the desert. The desert, except for Miss Scarlet and the Duke. Two things I'll just quickly mention that are, little bright spots on our radar or things you can completely ignore if you're not crazy like me. Tomorrow is the Golden Wedding. So you'll have heard me mention over the last few episodes that I was watching The Golden Bachelor. He picked his choice. It was great. We love her. Her name's Teresa. They are getting married live tomorrow on TV. It's like the golden wedding or whatever. Pretty much just because there's literally nothing nothing else they could put in prime time. Because if you really think about it, they're like getting married live tomorrow, Thursday at 8 p.m. So this is going on the ABC network Thursday, 8 p.m. time slot. A time spot that if you're old enough to remember a true golden age of television, previously housed such things as Shonda Rhimes television shows, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, etc., etc. And this is instead going to a live viewing of the Golden Wedding. Now, I'm thrilled. However, I do acknowledge that this is just a further indication that we are in a barren, dry land of television. Other thing, which is, indicative of there being nothing else for TV, but is a very smart choice in my opinion. ABC is also, it was ABC, right, Carey, that picked up Only Murders in the Building, and they're airing that starting at season 1 in their, I believe, primetime spots as well. That was a very smart choice on their end. That's a good option for main primetime network television. I expect that will bump up buzz even further. And I think I heard some comment came out from Selena Gomez this week saying she thinks she's going to put out maybe one other album and then she wants to just focus on acting and like TV and producing. And that's interesting coming with this, increasing rise of some of the attention of some of her projects. She also has Selena and Chef airing right now on HBO Max. And I'm obviously really biased because I'm a fan of hers, but I do think that's like one of the best. If you care about cooking shows, which I also do, it's one of the best cooking shows currently. It's like a straight shot of serotonin. Like if you are ever unhappy, I'm fully certain that will do more than antidepressants. That's not medical advice. Don't listen to me. Let's talk about our main show of these past couple weeks, and that is The Crown. Now, we touched on the first half of The Crown, and we touched on this ongoing theme of me realizing that, like, maybe monarchy was bad all along, and I just didn't see it till a guy took over. But I do have other comments, glows, and gripes about the back half of the season. But I want to let Kate start. Now, Carey, you've not watched The Crown, but you've listened to us talk about it insufferably. Is that still your status?
That is indeed the case. It's only been injected into my veins through YouTube.
Yes, fantastic. But you also have like a general awareness of who these people are on account of it not really entirely being fiction. I like how I just said, like, I'll start with Kate first, and then her feed immediately dropped off. So, well, given your awareness of where these characters that are actual real historical figures go, I think what I'll start with to kind of set the stage for you is where it ends. Because what I didn't know, even until even going into the back half, was where it was going to end. A lot of people thought it would end with Will and Kate's wedding. Some people thought it would end with Elizabeth dying and Charles's coronation. Some people thought that it would end. There were like various different spots, but where it actually ends is, are you ready to be let down? Charles and Camilla's wedding. Right? Right. And the whole leading finale, and I'm really just spoiling it for you, but these are historical events, so this is not much of a spoiler. The whole thing is leading up to Charles and Camilla's wedding. I guess at the time, I don't remember this, there was a lot of thought that maybe at that point she would choose to step down from the throne, and she would choose to, allow Charles to kind of take over earlier, be, coronated earlier, or whatever the case may be, because she was getting old in age. And so the whole finale, and it kind of ramps up to it in the whole final half, but certainly the final episode is her, essentially writing a speech where she's going to be turning it over to Charles, and then she doesn't. She drops that from the speech. She comes to this realization that you can't just opt out of public service just because people think you're too old, like you signed on to a lifetime of this. And she wanted to stay, but she kind of felt like she should step down, but then she realized, no, she should stay. Anyways, So it ends with that. It ends with Charles and Camilla's wedding. The entire back half is like Camilla propaganda. And on the one hand, I'm like, okay, like a woman who's slightly bad looks slightly better, but they had the reasons for that, and it's to prop up Charles. Anyways, so the ending, they bring back all actresses who played Elizabeth, like in her younger days, like when she was like, a young teenager to young mother to et cetera, whatever. I think there's like 3 or 4. They bring all of them back, and she gets to like face, I believe it's Westminster or whatever church of significance, and then Philip, her husband of however many years, because I believe he married her at 14, which is a whole other thing that they don't in this series, comes in and basically says, like, soon be under this floor, because there's like a grave underneath that Westminster or whatever. Soon enough, we're going to be underneath the floor, and that will be the end of it. None of these kids are prepared to carry on without us. The party's over. This is over. Basically, him saying, like, for all intents and purposes, monarchy as we knew it is over, which also just felt like the rug being pulled out from under me, because you just propped up the monarchy. You've gone above and beyond the line for your teeth to try to make Charles and Camilla, but mostly Charles, look good. And then you're like, teehee, just kidding. We know that monarchy is over, and that just kind of like is what it is, whatever. Either of you, because Carey, I told you, and Kate, you watched it, were either of you surprised by when in the storyline of like actual real history it ended? And did you like the ending? And Carey, I'll give you a pass on the second question if you don't want to answer, because you don't like totally know the ending, even though I just spoiled all of it for you.
Um, I got kicked off because of Wi-Fi problems. But to answer that question, I did not really enjoy any of season 6, and I was very frustrated with the last event they chose. I think specifically because all of the marketing around this season was really framed around the actors that were going to be Kate and William.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought we were going to get a whole bunch of them, and there was drama with their relationship. It was just a lot less fully combative and destructive, and more just like normal couple drama that would be like, we're in the public eye and X, Y, and Z, and it would have been still interesting TV to then put it compared to like Charles trying like whining to convince the queen to let him marry Camilla and all that stuff, and have that as like a parallel storyline and
Mm-hmm.
have more of the Kate Williams story. Instead, they had like one episode with Kate and William in it, and that was pretty much it. Whereas I thought they were leading up to like them getting married in the final episode, or at least like the proposal, or really reading it. That's where they were going to end it. Also done a lot of shifting away from being the focus, where like with the future of the monarchy being the focus, but they kept on flipping the script about like, oh, there's so potential. Oh no, it's a dead monarchy. The show is about the crown and the family lineage as a whole. Nope, it's just about Elizabeth, and they couldn't decide. And because of that, it felt kind of and repetitive. But they didn't even like go full ham with the super drama, and everybody's just like hurting each other left and right center. That was previously so pivotal about the crown. Like the last 5 seasons, there was no drama. It was just things happen, we react.
Okay, and another thing, I think the reason why they took like all of the potential like air and steam is because Will look bad. Will is being propped up to look like regal royalty, whatever, which was like totally not the case. They go. I want to say actually that they went above and beyond to make Harry look bad. They showed an actual, real historical that makes Harry look bad, and they chose to feature that and nothing that ever made Will look bad, despite Will doing plenty of things. So it's not like, oh, they shouldn't have shown that Harry dressed up as a Nazi party. That's fair, actually, and completely relevant part of the royal family. Harry was raised in the royal family, and at no point was he ever given any kind of awareness of any, like, chose to do that because, at that point, he was like, a evolved person. Like, he was making choices B, it was reflective of the whole family. He is reflecting not just his values, but everybody else's values, because the environment he grew up in, he was raised to believe that was like totally okay. This isn't a pass. Like, he should absolutely get flack for it, and they should absolutely include that. But I do find it very interesting that there's nothing even remotely similar that they include that Charles and Will did, like Will cheating on Kate later. They had like extended just any of the other things that went on that they skipped or they try to make him empathetic. With Charles, they actually had like an entire story trying to seem like he was the young cool because he like danced with the people of some part and parcel to colonizing. They go above and beyond for everybody else, but for Harry, they for sure made sure they included that little tidbit, and I just found that interesting.
Well, and I kind of am pro you show the best and worst of every single one of them because that's what made the first few seasons of The Crown.
Mhm.
I mean, even like the first two seasons when it was Claire Foy being Elizabeth, even with Elizabeth, there were times where you're like, I understand your explanation for why you're making this choice. As a monarch, sure, great. As a sister, you kind of suck. And it made her character really like multidimensional, and it made the story really interesting, even if it was sometimes like you can't pick a side. And that's kind of the whole interesting point is like by showing the bad and good of all of them, you no longer pick a side. You're like, the situation, they're right. The situation, they're right. And that's the messiness of like humanity and how we all just have different perspectives. And sometimes the wrong was to a point of kind of almost moral evil, and sometimes it was like, no, I'm going to be a little bit of a jerk to my sister, or I'm, you know, uh, I don't want to hang out with my brother today, kind of thing. And both of those can evolve and change the relationships. It's how TV show relationships work. I mean, that's how real relationships. But this season, they like 90% of the characters is kind of like this just over the border of like you're technically on the good side of this like divide, but we're not going up and down. We're just this plateau line of you're okay, you're fine, you're right.
Yeah, it's interesting because Stormy in the chat has echoed kind of that. She said, well, first of all, she said, my level of snark for the crown is rivaling Cammie's of The Flash. She also said she couldn't even make it through the last season. Actors playing William, Kate, and Harry weren't very good. I get in real life, Will and Kate are dull with the chemistry of negative 100. Maybe that was realistic, true. And they mentioned they barely got into the love story of Will and Kate. That and essentially she changed everything about herself to be a doormat with a crown. And I think it is interesting that to Stormy's point that they did choose to kind of contrast what Kate did with Diana did. So what Kate did in order to assimilate, and they kind of blame most of it on her mother, but Kate and family. I guess they were, they delayed when she went to school or changed when she went to school or chose where she whatever to put her in proximity to royals, whether it was specifically for Will or whether it was just part of social climbing, whatever. And then once she was a part of it, how she acted and how she assimilated and how she dressed, which we don't get to see a lot of, but it's just kind of heavily hinted at and implied from time to time, was that she did become a doormat with a crown, which is what Diana earlier refuses to do. And therefore, they achieve very different ends.
Well, and I don't know if I fully see it that way, but I do see what she's saying. But my frustration also was whenever we would see other characters like Kate's mom, it was a very one note interpretation, and this like third degree character was going to show up that they just kept on showing her as like this person that was manipulating a situation, which whether she was or wasn't, that's a fair thing to bring up, but it felt very rinse repeat without any like real explanation or even exploration as to why she was doing it. I mean, the why is kind of, you can infer why, but there was this like cartoonish, just like villain character just wanting this result and just doing the same thing over and over again until it happened. Um, and they had a line in there which it almost felt like they were calling themselves out, but then didn't do anything about it, where Kate compares her to Mrs. Bennet. And I was like, yeah, there is a level of like, I can appreciate you wanting the best for your daughter, and maybe the best for your daughter is like maybe not what actually would be the best. But she's not evil for wanting the best for her daughter. It's just she's being a little bit manipulative and pushing the scales and like doing things happening. Just very caricature of how like the newspapers always talked about her.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, even if those parts were true, it felt like a caricature, not like a character. And I was turned off by that. And a handful of characters that are not like main characters, but people that were related to them and how they were interacting with the entire story. They all kind of became just this like puppet or parrot for the one thing that they had to keep saying to the main characters just to get that to happen.
Mm-hmm. I think one shining spot was both the second to last episode that focused on her relationship, Elizabeth and Margaret's relationship, and their kind of sisterhood, her presence throughout this season, this show in general. But that second to last episode, and then Margaret in the flashbacks, like the farthest flashbacks of essentially a very, very young Elizabeth, night out on the town with the people. But yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Carey, what about you?
I
Are
thought it
you
was a good
surprised to hear
episode, but
it ends?
Wait, I did not hear the question.
I said, were you surprised to hear how it ends, or I guess when in history it ends?
Well, I would be the easy answer would be yes, right? But the question is always like, what type of story are you trying to tell? And it sounds like they were trying to tell a story in his interest, so we might as well get to that point, right? That's what at least that's what it felt like. And it's like it's no matter what journey or what end your character is going to get to, if you decided that this is the character that you're going to follow, then you've got to follow it wherever it goes, even if it doesn't serve, like it might serve his story and it may serve the story, but it might not be the best thing for the audience. In that respect, it sounds like it's just like what where they wanted to get to and where they had to get to. The question I have is, it sounds like they made a, I don't know if difference is the right word, but it sounds like they were in the way that they tell stories for people, it's interesting and different. And I'm just wondering, were there any different like or anything along those lines? And do they shoot them all at like one time? And by that I mean, do they have an opportunity to sort of course correct for anything, or do they shoot them all at once?
That's a good question. I believe they shot 5 and 6 nearly back to back, and then 6 aired in 2 separate halves. Peter Morgan, I believe, was the showrunner or EP or whatever throughout the entire thing. So that piece is consistent. And as I understand it, in some interviews that he gave towards the end, when, as you say, they're following one, essentially they're following the Crown, and the Crown is a character, and the Crown is Elizabeth for most of it. By the fact that the Crown becomes Charles and the Crown is going to become Will, and therefore they are telling Charles and Will's story, and doing so by trying very hard to paint Charles and Will in a positive light. I some interviews that I think Peter Morgan gave towards the end kind of heavily implied that he is strongly like sympathetic towards Charles in real life. And that I think is why some of the storytelling changes, because when Elizabeth is younger, I, as a viewer, was very sympathetic to her, even though maybe I shouldn't have been because I'm not pro monarchy or anything, but I was, because you're seeing, in a more general sense, like this kind of young, undereducated, because she was not very educated, woman being girl, woman being forced into, or forced, but really pushed into this position of sort of, but not really leadership. And you see her a lot of mistakes. You see her, lose her temper, or not always be a good mother, not always be a good partner, not always be a good mom. And even though I was willing to watch that and be like, oh, but it's still cool. It's so cool to see her go through her journey. I wouldn't say, and Kate, tell me if you have a different opinion. I wouldn't say that they tried very hard to give her a sympathetic telling. I think it was a balance between sympathetic and realistic. They still show her doing things that the viewer will disagree with, and even kind of unearth some skeletons that are not necessarily forefront in people's knowledge of like bad things that the royal family has done. They even go so far as to heavily imply that the queen was involved in the death of Diana, which I believe to be true, but that Charles and everybody else with it, which I do not believe to be true. I think that this was a coordinated campaign. They were going to take her down one way or the other, but they heavily imply knowledge or whatever. So they don't filter her bad behavior, but they do sometimes make her sympathetic. For Charles, I think they went much further. They had to go much further in filtering out his bad behavior, excusing his bad behavior, and just general like poor temperament. And I think they were set up to do the same with Will. We just don't see as much of Will to where we can point to, oh, they left out the dating piece. It's like they didn't get to that part in history.
I have a similar but not exactly the same kind of view on it. I think just in general, the first 4 seasons, they were sympathetic to an extent, especially in the case of, but, kind of in the sense of like, you can watch a show with the main character who's a protagonist and root for them, but watch them and kind of go, why are you still root because they genuinely have been doing well, but they can't get through whatever perspective that they're currently in to see it the way most other people would. So like it's kind of an Oliver situation. But the last 2 seasons has been a Barry situation. He can't do anything wrong at all, which I don't necessarily have a problem with you writing him as being somewhat sympathetic and giving him this like line redemption of like realizing the problems he caused for Diana, and he can't really go back and change those. However, they were going to play that like his involvement with the crash. But he could have they could have had a better arc for him in recovering his sons, while also showing like, yeah, him wanting his sons was a ploy for him to get social favor, or the person they did the best work, like their flawed character, wildly to me, was actually Camilla this season, because she was still his supporter, but kept on telling him, hey, it's not about you. They're your sons, you have to fix it. It's not their responsibility to come and say, you know what, Dad, it's fine. You're the father, you have to go do it. And she was the only character this season to kind of say that to him. And so it didn't feel consistently all the time like nobody was calling him on his faults, but it was Camilla doing it. So it felt like soft and tender, and it was accepted.
And it also served as positive PR for Camilla.
Yes.
There's no way in life for us to know if she served that function.
No, not at all. Because, I mean, there was a lot more, and in a lot of different ways this season, a lot more just presumption of how they would have talked with each other. There's actually a lot more interactions that wouldn't have been documented. And that's fine. If we're really hammering in that this is a fictionalized, assumptive retelling of it, great. That's fine. But lean into like their motivations could have been worse than expected and better than expected. You have to tell them multiple that for it. I don't know what it was, why they decided to do this, but to have like the spirits of previous characters show up all the time this season was an interesting choice for it to have not just previously done. If it was something they had been doing the whole time, fine. That's a great. It's stylistically, it's a fantastic way of telling a story and like how the ghosts of the people you've done wrong haunt you. This was just something they randomly decided to do, like in episode 4 of this season, and they did it 3 more times, um, for reasons.
Sort of like spiritual curtain call.
Yes.
Well, that was a whole show, and we definitely watched it. And honestly, as much as I bitch about the last season, overall, the entertainment value of the full show and some phenomenal performances that came out of the full show really made it worth watching. And I think if nothing else, it takes you, or it took me, on an introspective journey of like, okay, look, you forgave all these faults. And somebody who's like, she committed war crimes, like literally, okay. She like destroyed the lives of, she was instrumental, not single-handedly, but in destroying lives of a bunch of people, colonizing a bunch of countries, stealing a bunch of like culturally significant artifacts from the places that she colonized, etc. She was one of many. She may not have actually had that much power, but she had some. She was queen. Is it this like quirky, cute, like, look, she had leadership thrust upon her. We should like root for her for kicks and giggles. And then by the end, you're like, okay, now that you've set this precedent, look what happens. I don't think that was the journey they meant to take me on, but that was the journey they did take me on. And I'm happy to have learned my lesson until I forget in the next show that I watch. Carey, you have patiently listened to us being insufferable as always. I would love to hear more about what you have watched this week. Take us on a different journey.
Well, it was a holiday journey. What if season 2 took a different approach to how it disseminated or distributed its product instead of once a week, or in some situations where you just have like someone dump an entire series on one day. They decided to do sort of like the 9 days of Christmas. I think the first episode aired on the 23rd, and they aired them back to back to back for 9 days, which was really, really cool, considering that most people didn't have anything else to watch. Um, the episode, obviously, I'm assuming that you are familiar with sort of the format for season 1 in terms of what it looked
Mm-hmm.
like and the kinds of stories that they told. Um, and so the best things, obviously, about these episodes is that they are essentially, for the most part, self-contained. A crazy thing happened. How would it impact this character differently from probably something that you're familiar with, like Captain Carter, right? So you get
Mm-hmm.
that whole situation. Um, but there's also there are either characters that are intertwined or moments that intertwine during some of these episodes that you get a sense of they're leading to something bigger, which is obviously what they did in season 1, and they continue that in season 2. Why stop a good thing, right? But what I really appreciated about season 2 was that, and even with some of the episodes of season 2, I think there might have been one or two maybe that were supposed to be part of season 1. The stories, I certainly appreciated, and I know we had this conversation before about some of the live action actors
Mm-hmm.
did come back, voice their characters, which is crazy when you think about, we're talking about 30 episodes, and and sure, it might have been as easy as getting them on and say, hey, phone in your lines, right? But the fact that they committed to doing them was really cool, and sort of to hear characters that we sort of are familiar with and know really well, like freaking Kate Blanchett came back and voiced her character, and
Wow.
so yeah, it's like crazy, right? Um, what I really took away from season 2 is that, when you're watching a show and you have writers who really like and appreciate a character, so they feel like they want to highlight the character and write for them and give them like really interesting things to do. You can tell with what of season 2 that the writers really like her portrayal of Captain Carter, because of the 9 episodes, she was featured in 4 of them, if I'm not mistaken, and heavy arc toward the end in terms of sort of these loose narratives, which I certainly appreciated. Um, Another thing that's really funny is because it's particularly when Captain Marvel, I'm sorry, the Marvels sort of came out, and when
Hmm.
Miss Marvel came out, you heard all of these folks talk about negatively, obviously, about how Marvel was uh, doing so many women-centric and female stories.
Hmm.
In What If Season 2, which is incredibly great, I think it's been getting pretty rave reviews, but the stories and the most of the beats, the majority of the beats in What If Season, um, Gamora, I think that was the episode that probably was left over from season one, had a really good story to tell. Nebula, Karen Gillan, who came back to voice her character in the very first episode, which was What If Nebula joined the crew, because it was sort of like a hard boiled detective story, like shot and filmed out. I think it sort of paid a whole lot of homage, and it's actually a movie that I hadn't seen, Blade Runner. Never seen it, but you hear about it all the time, right? But they did it in sort of a Blade Runner type style, man, and it sort of like took you in and sucked you in from like the very first episode. So it's like it looked different, it felt different, and it was really cool. And so that sort of set the table for the rest of the season. And strangely enough, the narrative or the story from that first episode didn't necessarily carry over with the sort of loose narrative that connected the other stories, um, in terms of narratively connecting them, but it did connect them in a way of, we have this character who we've seen, we initially saw her, she was, I wouldn't say a villain, but she was an antagonist, and someone who's grown up under the thumb of Thanos would certainly have it, that would certainly impact the things and the choices that they make. But we could always sort of see that she had an ability to be more and do more. So that was what the first episode sort of brought, sort of that narrative, while it did tie into the rest of the story, at least that part of, hey, people can have a redemption, or people can do and be better than their circumstances. That, like, the narrative thread from that episode is sort of carried on to some of the other stories that we see. Like um, one of the stories is like, what if Star Lord took on Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and it was like Earth's Mightiest Heroes from like the '90s. So we get sort of a '90s lineup of the Avengers. Um, but it was basically like, hey, what if Yandu actually did take Peter Quill to Ego, and Ego raised him to be basically a world destroyer, or at least a world builder in terms of what he wanted to see. And it was still about innate ability, or this innate, goodness inside of the character, that even though under the circumstances, it still rises and it still shines. And so again, that was of season two and what we got to see. But saying all that, man, it was just, for you could just tell writers love Haley Atwell. Um, and probably Marvel feels really bad about what they did with the Captain Carter character in Multiverse of Madness. That was just the best thing about What If season two, or even season one for that matter, is that fundamentally different from what we've seen in the movies with the multiverse. It sort of feels like nothing matters because you got a multiverse, and if like a choice, or someone dies, or someone does something stupid, it the multiverse, with all these sort of different realities and different possibilities, it all feels like it doesn't matter for
Hmm.
whatever reason. Um, what they've accomplished in What If Season 2 is that even though these episodes are 30, 32 minutes long, and they have to squeeze through, and sometimes even when they're introducing new characters, they have to sort of give you a lot in that short period of time, and you may have a character that you just met, but you still feel like this episode, in this moment, sort of matters, even if it, whether it does connect to another story or whether it doesn't. Narratively, the way they told the stories, you actually care and have a thought and a feeling about what's happening to these characters, as opposed to feeling like they are sort of like action figure pieces in an action set. And if something bad happens, well, this is an Earth we don't care about. And sort of what if is a reality that we don't, I don't want to say that we don't have to care about, but it doesn't have to be canon but you still care about what happens to these characters in the moments and the things that they're dealing with. So in that respect, I think, and I know I've said this before, going back to the Marvels movie, like one of the things that was a benefit was that how breezy the movie was. They could take liberties with, hey, we don't have to connect all the dots because you can take context and you can take what's come before and you can keep it moving. And with 30 minutes, you can sort of do the same thing when you're telling all these disparate stories, but it still worked well. It was still narratively tight and it was fun and it was cool.
Would you
And
say
that's
Haley
something I can't.
Atwell's character, the Haley Atwell Captain Carter character, carries the main
Mhm.
emotional beat of season two?
She does. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It was it's a it's a narrative, or at least without spoiling it, that I felt you would, if someone is what happened, you would be like, but we've done this before, we've seen this before. But that scene with her and how she's dealt with it and how she chooses to move forward. Um, and I think I'm spoiling things to say when you talk about Captain
I'm
Carter, you
totally
talk
fine with
about Peggy
spoilers.
Carter, you're talking about grief. Yeah, talking about grief she wanted that she never got to have. And so those things aren't spoilers. Obviously, they have an impact on what that character does, the decisions she makes, and how people may try to manipulate those feelings and emotions and that sort of thing. But she certainly carries um, the emotional weight of the series. Um, and even it's still sort of, you still sort of feel like they were trying to tell the story about this person facing extraordinary situations and how they deal with it. I mean, they even, one of the episodes is, what if Hella, I think it's what if Hella got the 10 rings or something along those lines. It's basically the retelling of the first Thor movie, just basically you're putting her in place of Thor, but it's a story that we haven't had her have a chance to tell, and it brings new things to it. And the thing back to do it, it's freaking incredible. Um, so I have the series, um, and it gave an excitement from Marvel that, quite honestly, I haven't had in a long time. Even though I
Hmm.
like Marvel, it I was really excited for like season two, and it's crazy because it's like normally I'm like I have to be reminded that an episode is coming on, but it's like you get up and it's like, yeah, I think I better start watching on it. So um, absolutely a win for Marvel. I just hope that they can carry that momentum into their live action things.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm going to turn my Disney Plus back on for the month to watch What If and Loki. See, Loki, I was going to turn it on and watch for that, just for Loki, really. But for What If, I still remember how impressed I was with What If season one. And due to the holidays, I was actually not spoiled on What If season two for the most part. Not that I have any problem with spoilers, but it'll be kind of fun to watch it in that mindset. Now, another thing that I've not been spoiled on that I'm just gonna bop over to is Percy Jackson and the Jackson and what are they calling it?
The Olympians.
Okay, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Now, this was a phenomenon that missed me. You as
Mhm.
well.
Yes, Miss Me.
Because there were the books, and I don't know if the book, like, whenever they came out, that like wasn't my thing, and then the movies, not about it,
Mm.
and then now there's this show, and I think this show is for people many, many, many years younger than me. So you're the closest to that, Kate. So please talk us through this phenomenon because I've seen it all over my
Yeah.
timeline.
So for kind of like the backup of my relation to it, I read the first Percy Jackson around the time it came out.
Okay.
Didn't hate it, but I wasn't a fan. I didn't really care to read it again, so I didn't read the rest of them. And then I think I watched the movie. I don't really remember, and don't really remember it being anything spectacular or what. Um, but my best friend, that is like her favorite book series, whatever. So she was talking it up. And I had seen the interviews of the kids. And all I had been hearing about the kids was the casting was phenomenal and apparently very, very accurate to the characters just by their own personalities. So I went ahead and gave the first 2 episodes a chance. And I thought it was kid actors, and there's occasional time like this is children, and the target audience is still definitely that middle age level, but it's not like it's not a Disney like channel show that's targeted towards middle grades. Disney Plus show that is acceptable and appropriate. The distinctions
Okay,
different.
yes. Uh-huh.
Um, um, well done. I've actually started rereading first book, and I can see why I didn't like it when I was a kid. It has some of the very, very big cliches of that genre, of that age bracket. Would have bothered me then, they still bother
The
me now, but
chosen
it is a
special
good.
boy, the most important boy in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that, and it's not even really that, it's more the writing style, and how information's presented. It's that kind of style that always frustrates me. That would be more of the technical detail, to be honest. Um, I but watching the show, I have to say it's really well done. You immediately start to understand his character more. The action's done well. The humor's pretty good. The cast is great. Um, what I can tell is the movie or the show is a lot better at like correctly characterizing the characters. From what I've heard, the movie was extremely off and how these people actually acted.
Mhm.
And actually 12-year-olds instead of the characters are supposed to be 12, but those actors
Or
are fully
21.
formed adults. Yeah. Um,
That is something that stood
so
out to me
it
because I
is,
was looking at the casting. These are like baby in a good way. They're teeny
yeah,
weeny little
they're
kiddos.
they're tiny little, yeah, exactly. I mean, and I'm sure it's going to get multiple seasons based solely just on the reaction and how many people are really excited about watching it. Um, the I've seen cast interviews with them now, and just that 1 year's difference, they've grown
Oh
up
yeah.
significantly. And like, okay, yeah, but yeah, they've done a pretty good job. I would not rate this as like my top show on planet Earth. It's still not my favorite series. I'm not like the massive Greek mythology, but what I do know, I like the grittier stuff. And I actually tend to not like the hero stories. I like to hear the tragedies that cause the monsters, because I
Mm.
tend to find the hero stories are all kind of um
Better than
arrogant
everyone else.
and prideful, and it that tends to irritate me, that it's the same, like they all have that same fatal flaw um that really tears them down. But that's generally what frustrates me about a lot of those myths. um but overall, I think the story is really well done. uh and it's fun to watch. It's a bit to watch. That's not terrible. I am enjoying it. uh
I
so
look
I
forward
would
to
recommend it.
I look forward to giving it a shot. The reason why I bring it up with the show that Carrie just mentioned is because both are Disney Plus shows.
Yes.
So if I'm gonna go ahead and fork over my month of Disney
Yes.
to Mr. Walt himself. May as well just check all the boxes. So those will be the three
Well,
that I'll be marathoning in between Miss Scarlet and the Duke episodes. Now, since we are in a drought of television, I don't have anything of substance to bring to the table as my like one thing I'm highlighting of what I watched this
mhm.
week or over the holidays, but I have something of not substance, and that's Married at First Sight. And this season is terrible. Everybody's bad. None of them like each other. They are not at all ready for like serious relationships, despite them all being in like very different stages of life. Literally has nothing to do with the age. They are not good. This is Denver must be a hellhole. I don't know how to explain. Like I don't know how they found this many bad people actually, and I don't mean like bad people as in they're bad people. Like I wouldn't trust them in a dark alley. Like it's not that kind of vibe. It's just like everybody on the season has like a litany of like I don't want to say like unforgivable flaws. That sounds so mean, but just like they've got like a litany of issues that make them like incompatible with each other and potentially incompatible even if you were to like switch them around. Like there's like one guy went into this and he was like, I refuse to get divorced. Like I do not believe in divorce. I do not want divorce, whatever. And I'm like, admirable, love that. Let's go. Okay, let's see how this plays out. And then like a couple, and he's, by the way, like if we're gonna like sit here and be shallow or whatever, he's probably paired with the hottest girl of the season. So like you're off to a great start, like whatever. And then like a week into it, he was like, yeah, there's just like something intangible. Like I just like I don't know. I don't like it. I don't feel, but he won't explain it and like can't verbalize feelings beyond like a 3-year-old level. And then there's this other guy who is like bending over backwards to try to look like the good guy, even though it's so clear he has like not even the slightest interest in his wife. Like it's very clear she's like not his type, zero chemistry. She's trying so hard to flirt with him, and he's basically trying to crawl inside 5 pairs of sweatpants. Like it is not, but he's trying so hard to be like, yeah, I like love my life. My wife is so good. No, yeah, like I just like to take it slow when it comes to like physical stuff, like being within 6 inches of each other, whatever. And it's like, just admit that you're not into her. Like, stop trying to look like the good guy. We all can see through the, anyways. It's like that kind of vibe. There, explosions, somebody refusing to get me. Anyways, if you want not quality television, there you go. So I will use that as the transition to quality. We'll talk about our woman of the week. Hey,
Mm.
let's work backwards. Kick us off on your woman of the week.
Okay, so my woman of the week is actually a show we haven't talked about yet. It is an animated show on Netflix, and I heard a couple people talk about it, and so I was like, okay, fine, I'll watch it. It is called The Blue Eye Samurai, and basically, if you take the undercover like woman dressing up as a man for different reasons, fighting in a East Asian country, that part
Mulan
of
energy.
Mulan energy, but like the anti-hero characterization that they kept on trying to say Oliver was in season, give it the mature rating to actually go for it. That's the main character. Mizu, there's two female main characters, basically Mizu and Akemi. Mizu is the Blue Eye Samurai. She was born of a illegal uh, meeting between this East European man and her mother, and has this grudge for the 4 white men that were in Japan during the time of her conception, and goes on a revenge spree because what happens is because she has blue eyes, it marks her as different, and she is treated like a monster her entire life. The only person that was ever kind to her was a blind man who helped her learn how to be a black swordsmith. And she goes on this revenge mission to kill all 4 of them. And in that journey, she has extreme loss and heartache and tragedy. But she also starts to learn some of the good things about humanity and starts to gain back that humanity that she's tearing apart limb by limb. And that's kind of mirrored by Kimmy's story, who is a princess who is being forced into marriage with a guy she doesn't want to be married to. She tries to kind of sway her father to let her marry a samurai that she likes. That plan falls through, and you instead follow her basically breaking every social rule in any way she possibly can so that she can avoid this trap that she doesn't want to be in. And ultimately doesn't get what she wants, but grows and eventually learns how to sway situations to how she wants. This fair warning: this show has more gratuitous violence and nudity and sex scenes than even Game of Thrones, I would say. But it's animated.
Wow.
Just
I think there's a term for that. It doesn't quite come to mind.
mm,
Okay, well, I love that you're bringing some animated characters into Women of the Week.
Mhm.
It sounds fantastic. We love Mulan and we love Mulan energy. So, and the fact that it's on Netflix means it's actually like available to watch. Every time somebody recommends an anime to me, first of all, like I'm not like an anime connoisseur person, but it's always like, first, go on this site you've never heard of that has like 50 pop-up things.
Mhm.
Sell your soul to a troll, sign away your life and data to whatever, make an account through what, and then maybe possibly you'll get like episodes of the quality that looks like it's filmed on a potato, which I shouldn't judge because potentially the quality for this very live stream is low, but that will be fixed next week. Carrie, who is your woman of the week?
Well, interestingly enough, I had a woman of the week that I was going to name like at the beginning of the broadcast, but I changed it. Um, I was going to she's always a woman of the week. Haley Atwell is Captain Peggy Carter, but I talked enough about her already. I'm going to switch it up and go back into the past because I just watched the very first episode of Orphan Black. Um, and so, strangely enough, Tatiana Maslany is going to be my woman of the week. Um, I've only seen the very first episode. I'm sort of like um, bootlegging this series because I'm not watching it on like a regular streaming service, but just between us. So what I really, really, really liked about the first episode is that you sort of like you jump in and it's sort of like you get thrown into the deep end of the pool because you sort of got like a character who is sort of in over her head trying to do all these things and all these circumstances and crazy situations are happening to her and it's just you just feel like as a viewer you're sort of like bouncing around just as she is sort of picking things up just as she is. um, and obviously, I mean, I know where this. I don't know where the series goes, but I know obviously the premise of what the show is about and how much heavy lifting she had to do throughout this series. And I'm just like from the very first episode, from like the very first few minutes, to be honest, I was just sort of sucked in, and I was like, yeah, I'm ready to go on this freaking acid trip of a roller coaster ride and see where the hell it goes. And it's primarily because of her. So she is my woman of the week.
Tatiana Maslany is just like amazing and everything, but that show is just phenomenal example of her range and what they do throughout. I'm just very jealous that you're getting to watch it for the first time again. So, so good. Please enjoy. I can think of nothing else better to water the desert that is now television. My one of the week is begrudgingly all of the actresses who played Elizabeth because they convinced me to put up with the monarchy for a while. So, a begrudging hats off to you. Not a bow, but a hats off. That is what it is. I have nothing further to say on the matter. I will see you both, sorry for going overtime, in a couple weeks to be absolutely feral about Miss Liza and the Duke. I can't wait to be disappointed. I hope you are as well. Bye.